Hello, Silo citizens. Welcome to the Silo Season 1, Episode 5, Ending Explained. Fair warning, spoilers ahead. But let's dive in. We open on Juliette inspecting George Wilkins's file she found in the vent from the previous episode. As her eyes feverishly race through the whirlwind of pages, a revelation crashes into view. In his interview transcripts, we learn that she is safe because when asked about the watch, George confessed he did not share the illegal relic with anyone else. The moment is cut short when Juliette is summoned due to an urgent matter. We see the aftermath of the previous episode. Deputy Marnes has been murdered. Tensions being at an all-time high, the burning questions on everyone's mind are who killed him and what was their motivation? Juliette wants to do some of her own investigating, so before the mortuary team's arrival, she asks to stay behind to look for evidence. She notices something has been torn off from one of Marnes's walls and finds a piece of paper in one of his pockets, with Doris Kennedy's name circled. More on that later. This scene in Bernard's office is one of my favourites from the episode, as we get a discussion between dueling philosophies on how to communicate tragedy to the citizens of the silo. One thing is clear, those in power, such as Bernard and the judicial, want to maintain order more than they want to be truthful to the people they represent and serve. Juliette, on the other hand, genuinely wants to act in the best interest of the silo citizens by telling the truth. This sets up a dynamic of competing ideologies that I can't wait to see unfold in the rest of the series. Ultimately, they all agree to push a love story between Mayor Ruth and Deputy Marnes, so that the general public will fixate on the shocking revelation of their unsanctioned affair rather than focus on the murder itself. This distraction strategy is a classic PR move we see all the time, and it builds upon the themes of deception in this episode and in the series as a whole. As everyone leaves, Sims and Juliette share a tense exchange, where it is revealed that Billings has been installed as deputy. This further proves the level of distrust Sims has in Juliette being sheriff, as it was revealed in the previous episode that he preferred Billings in the role, but Deputy Marnes supported her instead, arguing that they should give her a chance until she fails to do her job. It is in this moment we see Sims vying for power and control and attempting to use Juliette as a scapegoat for the recent crimes that have taken place. The stakes are high for her, but more on that later. Another highlight for me from this episode is the difference in speeches given at the funeral. Bernard delivers a speech that relies on numbers and statistics to emphasize the impact that both Mayor Ruth and Deputy Marnes have had on the silo citizens, whereas Juliette delivers an off-the-cuff and honest speech from the heart that, if you look at the crowd, seems to resonate with people more than what Bernard said. Will she eventually win over the masses and inspire them to follow her in uncovering the truth of the silo? I guess we'll have to wait and see. During their investigation, Juliette attempts to shake Billings off by sending him to go have lunch with his family and making the excuse she wants to familiarize herself with the Pact. Instead, she goes to Patrick Kennedy's home, who is the husband to the late Doris Kennedy, and illegally enters the residence to search for clues. Juliette suspects Patrick no longer lives at this address and finds rat poison and the torn portrait of Mayor Ruth from Marnes's wall planted as evidence of the murder. As she leaves, a neighbour confirms that Patrick no longer lives here, adding to Juliette's suspicion that someone is trying to cover up both crimes by pinning it on a scapegoat. The lies just never stop, do they? Initially, the next scene had me worried about Billings and whether or not we could trust him, as he went straight to the judicial instead of going home for lunch. However, I was pleasantly surprised when he candidly told Juliette about a name the judicial is trying to push as the prime suspect, Ralph Melby. The judicial wanted Juliette to fail by going after the wrong suspect, so they could eventually step in, arrest Patrick Kennedy instead, and replace her with a patsy they control. She issues an arrest warrant for Patrick Kennedy as bait, rushes to his apartment, and confronts Doug Trumbull with the truth. Patrick Kennedy was reassigned to a different address, but the system did not register the changes, so their planted evidence was actually in a random couple's home, which would have wrongfully indicted them. I had a grin on my face watching his face and the tension in the air right after she said this. Of course, he runs, and the chase takes them through the race to the top, which the silo citizens are too captivated by to notice anything else. They fell for the up-top's distraction strategy, just like they assumed. I couldn't believe it, but it works to show that their power and control comes from deception. This establishes how the mayor and judicial are able to get away with so much right under their noses. As the chase ends with a life-or-death struggle, some people of the silo take notice and rush to Juliette's aid. Even though it almost cost Juliette her life, she finally knows who killed Deputy Marnes. Later in the episode, Douglas heads for the janitorial closet in order to find Sims. In this scene, Sim shares an anecdote from his childhood about how his father was able to facilitate his bully's family moving to the lower levels, even though he was just a janitor. My biggest takeaways from this exchange were that political roles, such as the sheriff and mayor, are figureheads for the masses, while the real people pulling the strings hide in the shadows, and that the silo is structured to keep the whole community divided and sectioned off into a social hierarchy. It is in this divisive system that deception can thrive, so that nefarious actions can take place with little to no pushback from the silo citizens. It is at the end of his speech when Sims deceives Douglas by asking him if he is ready to know what is behind the janitorial closet door, to which he blindly accepts the invitation to pledge his loyalty, and Sims pushes Douglas off the edge to his death. This cuts off any connections between the two, allowing for Sims to go unnoticed in the investigation. With Douglas dead, Juliette takes the opportunity to present him as the true suspect behind both Mayor Ruth and Deputy Marnes' death to the judicial. Without much pushback, they accept this as the truth and close the case to avoid spending more time investigating this any further. They finally have an answer to give to the people, so that's all that really matters to them. As the episode wraps up, we are treated to a few more nuggets of information that I have a feeling will play out in the rest of the series. Sandy is reassigned to another office due to her fears of being monitored, which alert us and Juliette that whatever threat is looming in the background has eyes on her and her office. I didn't know how to feel about Sandy's character at first, but I think she serves the purpose of showing how the average person questions the authority within the silo, but fears rocking the boat by taking action. We'll just leave that to Juliette. Bernard, on the other hand, seems to have been won over by Juliette and offers to help her should she need anything. She accepts this and asks for 2 days off to pack up her things and say goodbye to her life down in the lower levels. He is a character that seems to know more than he lets on, which we saw when he claims to have guessed that Mayor Ruth and Deputy Marnes were romantically involved. So I'm curious to see how he plays a role in Juliette's journey in uncovering the truth. Will he be an ally or a foe? Time will tell. Following up on the last episode, this was another great moment I loved from this episode. We finally see what Lukas has been studying on the screens as Juliette makes her way down to the lower levels. He reveals that he has been tracking the lights in the sky on the screens and noticed how they moved in a specific pattern. This was such an interesting exchange because it reminds me of how ancient cultures would track the movement of the stars and planets in order to learn more about the world around them. So it was very fun to see that used in a similar way in this series. Juliette shares this information with Martha and notes that the screens in the upper levels have a better view in order for the lights to even be seen, which is another thread in the social hierarchy commentary that shows how certain information is available to you depending on where you live in the silo. Their conversation continues with Martha bringing out the camcorder, which I'm excited to see the role this relic plays in the series, because the people in the silo have only been exposed to pictures, so the concept of recorded videos wouldn't be something that immediately comes to mind when looking at the screen. Let me know if you feel the same, but it feels very relevant to see how technology we might not even know exists could be used to influence a large group of people. The implications of that are terrifying, especially when Martha goes on to discuss with Juliette that she thought 2 rules in the Pact that were very strange to her. The first being that there could be no system built that allows for traveling between levels, and the second being that the magnification power of tools could not exceed a certain point. Upon hearing this, it seemed pretty clear to me that these rules are made to keep society segmented, to discourage the sharing of information, and that there could be no advancements in technology that helps to expand the citizens' knowledge, effectively keeping them all in the dark. This doesn't stop Juliette's desire to bring the truth to light, and in the last scene of the episode, she travels down to George's underground workstation to retrieve the Pez Dispenser, with the hope that this will convince Bernard to reopen George's case. Let me know if you felt the same, but especially in this shot, I think the concept of a Pez dispenser symbolizing the outside world is so fun. Its bright blue and yellow color palette, juxtaposed against the dark and grimy setting, teases the strange potential of the outside world that they have yet to see. It reminds me of the quick shots we've seen of the birds flying in the bright blue sky from the hard drive video in the previous episodes. That's all for episode 5 of Silo. Let me know your thoughts and theories below. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.